Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us for a conversation that is very vital to our community. My name is Leah Ulatowski, and I'm the top editor of the Sheboygan Press, and I am also the living and storytelling editor, one of several, for USA Today Network Wisconsin. We're here today to mark the beginning of another year of the Kids in Crisis series, telling the stories of young people and their mental health journeys. Kids in Crisis is just one more example of the importance of local in-depth journalism, crafting informative but human stories with a lasting impact. Kids in Crisis is important work. It is one more tool, one more conversation starter about our youth and their mental health. Later tonight, we will be delving deeper into this topic with our panel over here. But first, I will turn it over to USA Today editor Rob Menser.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thanks to everyone who is here in person and to all who are tuning in online as well to our live stream. My name is Rob Menser. I'm an editor with USA Today Network Wisconsin. I live in Wausau, but I edit stories from our network all over the state, and I am the project editor for our Kids in Crisis series. This is the third year that we've been reporting on youth mental health in Wisconsin, and I don't think when we launched these stories that we imagined that we would be here 3 years later talking about the topic. We have seen real progress on the issue, both on the level of actions taken by our legislators and a sense in the community that this is an issue that we need to take seriously. But we all know that there is more work to do because we know how high the stakes are. Here in Sheboygan, in recent days, we've seen the tragic consequences of youth suicide and the community's response to it. So we are here for a reason tonight. I did not start Kids in Crisis myself. Jim Fitzhenry and Rory Linnane, who did, are here tonight. But I have had a role in editing it from the first year. And one of the things that I think has been striking to all of us who've worked on the project has been to see the way that young people themselves have been leaders in so many ways in standing up for what they need for youth mental health, in fighting the stigma around discussing mental health issues. I think in these weeks since the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, we have all seen how powerful the voices of young people can be when they are on a mission. So this is our goal with Kids in Crisis, and it's one of the goals of this event. We want to hear from mental health professionals and others who work directly on the issues that affect our community's kids. But we're also making sure this year to make room for the voices of young people themselves, and we are making sure to listen. So thanks everyone again for caring enough about this issue to participate. A couple bits of housekeeping. We have distributed note cards on your chairs. If you have questions, either now or as our talk proceeds, please write them down on the note cards. Pete Frank, our engagement editor, who played a big role in making this event possible, will collect those cards and we'll try to address as many questions as we can. We want to acknowledge Bellin Health, an underwriter for the Kids in Crisis series. We have a short video from Bellin. Also here with us tonight is Barb Begelke from the Center for Suicide Awareness. Barb runs the Hope Line. We've written about this within our series, and it's really an important tool in the state that a lot of young people use. And we'd like to take a moment to have Barb say a few words about the Hope Line, and about what she does. Barb, thanks so much for being here. And Pete has, yeah.
Come over this way. Okay. Good evening. Thanks for coming out to a very important subject. As you graciously said, I'm Barb Begelke. I'm the founder and executive director for the Center for Suicide Awareness. We actually are located in Kaukauna, which is on the other side. And we're the ones that brought the Hope Line into the state of Wisconsin. If you don't know what the Hope Line is, I really encourage you to. We have a booth back there as well. What it is, it's a text-based text. How many of you have kids? Right? You try to get a hold of your kids. If you call them, they don't answer. But miraculously, if you text them, they do, right? So when you want to meet your kids where they're at, we created the text-based emotional support line. When we started it in October of 2014, we literally had no idea. We were the 14th state to open up a text line, and little by little, texts came in, and more text and more text. It went from just being open a few short hours to being open 24/7, 365 days. Someone came up and said, "Does anybody use it?" Yes, we've had thousands of calls, but more importantly, 47 people actually started their suicide attempt while they were texting the Hope Line, and we caught all 47. So for that was worth opening it up. It's easy. You text 741 and the word Hope Line and send. You immediately are connected to a real person, not a computer, a responder that's trained to answer everything from, "I'm having a bad day," to, "You know what, life is stressful," to, "I've lost my job," to, yes, suicidal thoughts. So when we talk about what are people saying, we have seen consistently, now let's do our math, 2014 to 2018, 3 years of consistent data that depression, suicidal thinking, anxiety, stress, isolation, and relationships are all what's being talked about on the Hope Line. So if you have kids, if you have yourself, because this isn't just for kids. When we started it, we thought only kids are going to do it. No. This is for the veteran that texts me at 2 o'clock in the morning because he can't sleep because of PTSD. This is the person that says, "I've lost my job and I'm nervous what my next steps are." This is for any age. So with that being said, there's a lot of materials in the back, and I encourage you to use this resource. And thank you for coming, because you're part of the solution.
Thank you, Barb. So I should say, yes, we do have tables in the back. One of our goals here tonight is to help folks connect with resources. Please take a look at the materials in the back, and as well, we'd love to have you stay for a few minutes after our program is over tonight if you want to talk with one of the professionals here or with one of us. If you have time and would like to share some of your thoughts, our reporter Marina Affo of the Sheboygan Press will be writing about this event. You can speak with Marina, and our video team also will be looking for folks who wouldn't mind sharing some reactions, takeaways for a video that we'll post. So thank you so much. So now I would like to have our panelists introduce ourselves. Thank you, panel, for being here. Please.
I'm Shar Specht Pakniak. I am the founder and CEO of Horizons for Girls. We mentor students in Sheboygan County, and we are in our 6th year and proud of the fact that we're able to say girls that stay engaged in our programming, 100% graduate from high school. The little fur ball on my lap, that happens to be Faith. She is a certified therapy dog that works with me with the students.
Oh man, I have to follow Faith. Hi, my name's Dr. Sarah Reed, and about 9 months ago I was incredibly privileged and grateful to happen upon a job with Rogers in Health, the education and advocacy arm of Rogers Behavioral Health. We're based in Brown Deer. And InHealth's mission is really to alleviate the stigma associated with mental health challenges, as well to build the community capacity to address stigma related to mental health. And I'd say we only have 4 people that are a part of InHealth right now, so that's a pretty big undertaking for just 4 of us. So fortunately, we're really privileged to work with WISE, or the Wisconsin Initiative for Stigma Elimination, and that work as well. And WISE is a statewide coalition of organizations and individuals promoting inclusion, support for people who are affected by mental health challenges, but also for their families and support systems as well. And WISE promotes evidence-based programs and practices related to stigma reduction. And this is in partnership with people across the state, NAMI, MHA, Prevent Suicide Greater Milwaukee, Wisconsin Family Ties, and a number of people who have lived experience themselves, because one of the things that we fundamentally believe is that there's a lot of power in storytelling and in sharing our lived experience.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Carey. I work with Sheboygan County Health and Human Services. My primary role is working in the Children and Family Resource Unit, and I work with children, youth, and families that have mental health concerns. We form teams to help kids and families kind of be successful and reach their goals. But the big thing that I'm here about tonight is our trauma-informed parenting workshop. Katie Pruitt is the trauma-informed care coordinator, and she and I and Joanne Peterson co-facilitate the trauma-informed parenting workshop. We are in our 4th session. It's an 8-week class, and it's originally was set up by the state for foster parents, but we have had such a wonderful array of people, including foster parents, adoptive parents, grandparents, biological parents, teachers, therapists, professionals, mentors, and it's wonderful to see everyone coming together and working and learning more about trauma, the effects that it has on the kids that we work with, and adults, and the different neurobiological things that trauma has. And so we are in our 4th one right now, and we're going to do it twice a year, one in the evening and one during the day.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Trisha Erpelding, and I am the Education Coordinator at Mental Health America in Sheboygan County. We are a nonprofit mental health resource and referral agency, and we provide services really in 3 different areas. We have education and prevention, access to care, and also recovery and support. So the education and prevention piece is really focused on educating the community and also students within our schools. We have more traditional kind of sit and gets where we go in and we speak to classrooms about depression, suicide prevention, anxiety, other mental health disorders, and we're really proud of our Mindful Classroom initiative. We go into the classrooms and we provide a 10-week mindfulness science-based program to students, teaching them to focus, to calm down, to notice their stress, notice their emotions, and give them tools that they can then use to to cope and to be more resilient and things like that. We also provide a lot of community presentations and other sort of educational opportunities. Our access to care helps people to find mental health care within our community. Navigating the mental health care field can be very, very stressful, especially for someone who may be in crisis. So we seek to provide that support to people to help them find a counselor or a doctor or someone that they could go to connect with services in order to better help themselves. We also provide the Directory of Community Resources, so some of you may be familiar with that. It is a book of pretty much anything you could think of in the community that someone may need, whether it's a mental health care need, transportation to a doctor's appointment, daycare, kids programs in the summertime, whatever it might be, chances are it's probably in that book. We also have our recovery and support program. So we have the Open Door facility, which is a drop-in center for folks to go and hang out during the day. It's a non-judgment, just fun place to hang out for people who may have had some sort of lived experience with mental illness. And then we also provide support groups. We have our Compassionate Parents group for those who have lost a child, and also our suicide loss support group for those who have lost a loved one to suicide.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We also have in the audience Carla Vorpal, who is a social worker with the Sheboygan School District. But I want to start with Dr. Reed. You work with young people, but we all have a story. You've agreed to talk a little bit about your experience and how you came to do the work that you do.
Absolutely. Should I stay here? Or?
You can stay there if you want.
Yeah, so in the interest of full disclosure, I do trainings and presentations for a living, and yet the prospect of sharing a little bit of my own story is rightfully still a little unnerving. And I think, through my own experience and work with young people, though, I've really learned why it's important to talk about our own mental health challenges. I see the root cause of mental health challenges as well as our inability or uncomfort discussing them as being related to stigma. And that can make us really silent on the topic. It can be really hard to find people who are willing to share their stories. And so I want to just reflect back a little bit on my own personal experiences to show why it can be difficult to talk about our individual mental health challenges. So the first stop I'm going to take us back to is high school, which is, 16 years ago now. I came out as gay 16 years ago in a very public way. And I was the only gay couple at my senior prom, and I insisted that we were afforded a couples ticket at a discounted rate rather than 2 singles tickets. So I was a very young advocate where it came to same-sex rights. But that outspokenness did not extend to mental health. From age 11 to about 18, I had an eating disorder. And as a junior, I started to look really ill, thin, jaundiced, very sickly, moving around constantly, rarely eating. I look at pictures from that time in my life right now, and I cringe at how the physical toll that my eating disorder took on me. Eventually, though, fortunately, my mom approached me, and the code of silence around it was broken and insisted that I go to therapy. And I was really resentful at the time, if I'm honest, and yet now it's one of the things in which I'm most incredibly grateful. So in high school, I was so incredibly ashamed and scared of how people would react that, if I'm honest, I lied. When I had to leave class early or leave soccer class early to go to therapy or see my dietitian, I made excuses. When I fainted on the soccer field due to overexertion, I blamed it on a virus. And once I even forged a hall pass that gave me an alternate explanation for why I was leaving. So why was I so closeted in this instance? Well, I was already starting to feel really vulnerable about my sexual identity, and facing reactions to both was more than at the time I thought I was emotionally prepared to do. And even then, as a teen, I was aware of the tendency to conflate sexual identity with mental illness. One of the first things somebody said to me after I came out was, "Can't you get a therapist to cure that?" And so the stigma related to mental health really intersected strongly related to my sexual identity. Okay, flash forward 5 years. I am going to jump to graduate school. I hope that's okay and I'm not deviating too much. So in my doctoral program, I had severe anxiety and depression and felt like an imposter for nearly 7 years. And in my darkest moments, I thought that the only way to quiet my mind and have any peace was to die. And during this time, I experienced what's known as passive suicidality. Being passively suicidal can involve a desire to die without a plan to actually take your life. But for me, when I was passively suicidal, I wasn't actively doing things to take care of myself. In my experience, that meant things like not buckling my seatbelt, texting while driving, getting in a car with somebody who was known to be intoxicated, basically doing things that I knew were dangerous because I was really apathetic about life. And for me, it meant just countless times that I put myself in harm's way. And when at its worst, it meant hoping that I wouldn't wake up or being disappointed when I did. Fortunately, I was pretty proactive about getting help for myself. I sought therapy with 4 different counselors during graduate school, but I was, again, incredibly silent about it, even though I was in a psychology program. Go figure. It's a little bit ironic. And there are specific reasons this time why I didn't speak up. First, with my family, I didn't want to burden them. I didn't want to worry them. I wanted to protect them. My parents, well-being though they were, once upon a time told me I had been their difficult child, and I had spent my entire adolescence trying to be a great child, a great student, a great athlete, independent, so on and so forth. And that just felt like such a sucker punch that I didn't ever want them to lose sleep over me again. And then among my peers in graduate school, I didn't want to be perceived of as incompetent or incapable, somebody who lacked the ability to survive the rigors of grad school. And though anxiety and depression are incredibly, incredibly prevalent in graduate students, it's hardly ever talked about. There is a really competitive atmosphere that is really yields a survival of the fittest kind of mentality. And so I felt admitting to my struggles would do me a disservice, and I'd either be ousted or coddled to avoid some kind of burnout. So I think that this academic culture in some ways is kind of akin to masculinity culture, where it can be incredibly, incredibly difficult for men to buck stereotypes and to talk about their problems and their feelings and to seek help. All right, flash forward to today. So I see some people perking up. Good. What I want to impress upon you is that it's so hard to reach out and talk about our mental health challenges, especially for young people, especially for people who are in the midst of crisis, but it's also important. And doing so takes an incredible amount of strength and bravery. Now, I kind of fit the profile of someone for whom you'd think it would be easy. Woman, growing up in a middle-class lifestyle, was in a psychology program, had a mom who was in the health field, had other people in my family with mental health struggles, and yet it has been and remains incredibly, incredibly difficult. So I think that in part we have kids in crisis because we have a culture in crisis. And my heart really hurts for my younger self who wasn't willing to ask for help because she was scared. And I find it heartbreaking that so many young people who need help and support remain silent out of fear and shame. I heard a yes, here. So for their sake, we just need to be more comfortable talking about mental health and our own personal challenges. And we need to have those conversations despite the fact they're uncomfortable. And we really need to have these stories shared to give light to statistics. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Shar, I want to ask you to speak a little bit more about the work you do with young people, and then we'll speak with Guadalupe in a moment.
Okay, we work with young women in middle school and high school that are referred to us sometimes by family, very often by professionals, by social workers, by teachers, and they might be struggling with a variety of different things that could be academic or family issues, but almost always when you dig far enough down, mental health is in there someplace. When we're working with the students, we make sure that we earn their trust so that they know that we're going to be there for them. To me, it's real important. I have 18 certified mentors that work with me. Our organization runs 100% with volunteers. So for any of you sitting out there thinking, well, I can't help, I don't know how to help, there's training, there's definitely resources, and there's something that any of you could do to be a part of what's happening. These young people are waiting for someone to listen to them, someone to pay attention, someone to really just reach out and give them a hand. So please consider anybody in your neighborhood, even a kid next door, and be a part of their life. It's one of the statistics that scares the heck out of me when you look at how many of our young people have a relationship with another caring adult. Not just their parents, not just their family, but a caring adult. It's going to make a difference.
Thank you so much. And Guadalupe Martinez is a recent graduate of, fairly recent, I think we said a few years, of the Horizons for Girls program. I'm going to ask you to step up. We have a microphone for you. Guadalupe, thanks so much for being here tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
All right. Well, my name is Guadalupe Martinez, as I said. I'm a former student of SHARS, and I am a survivor of physical and sexual abuse as a child. I don't really know how to go from there.
Well, how did you come to be a part of Horizons for Girls?
Right, well, they were talking about not having somebody to turn to when you're in that situation. When I was a kid, that was all I knew, like being abused and being told that nobody's there for you or that you were going to be in trouble if you tried to talk to somebody. So when I was in middle school, high school, would act out in whatever way that I could. I went through self-destructive behaviors, cutting. I was very suicidal. But I didn't know how to ask for help, so I would just kind of toe the line. I'd be like, well, notice me, somebody, but then somebody would reach out and I would feel ashamed. And all of this went on until I was in high school, and I tried to kill myself several times until my sophomore year. I wanted to die, but I didn't actually want to, because I'd look at my mom and I'd be like, she's struggling, and I didn't want to be that example for my brothers. So I went to school one day and I talked to the social worker and I said, this is going on and I don't know what to do anymore. So she put me in touch with Shar, and it took a while for us to finally meet due to me procrastinating, trying to actively go out of my way not to talk to her. But finally we met up, and
She didn't have the dog at that time.
no, she didn't have the dog. Honestly, I was like, no reason to talk to her. So, it was all that, and finally I was able to talk to Shar, and yeah.
People say that, some people describe, you can say if this is your experience, that talk about the time when they realized themselves that they needed to make a change or needed to accept the help that others are offering. Did you have an experience like that, or is that not your experience?
There was one night, as I mentioned, I would cut myself. My mother, she tried really hard in whatever way that she could to get me help. And I feel like she must have felt like I was spitting in her face by doing the things that I was doing. And I know it hurt her to see the things that I was doing, but she didn't know how to approach it. So she scolded me one night when she saw my arms, and she said, this is the example that you're setting for your little brother. And since she was always working and my other brother would work because he was young and he thought he needed to help, I didn't want them to see me as a weak role model. So that was a turning point for me. I said, if something happens to me, I don't want my mom to blame herself, and I don't want my brothers to be left without a sister. I want to be a better role model for them.
So you graduated from high school, and you did AmeriCorps, is that right?
I did.
And what's your life like now? Where are you now?
Well, I mean, I don't want to die anymore. Not all the time, anyway. I mean, obviously. I mean, it's something that when you go through that, you develop your issues, and I still have a lot of depression and pretty severe anxiety, but I mean, thanks to Shar, I was able to do AmeriCorps, and she gave me the tools and self-confidence to do do that, to finish that. And I think AmeriCorps in turn also gave me a lot of self-confidence. So now I know that if I stumble, if I struggle, I have the support system and I have the tools to continue and not stay down. And that's where I am today.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing. Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So we're going to get to your questions. If you have questions, you can pass them down to the middle, and Pete will collect. But I have a couple of questions. Listen, I'm a guy who has questions. So this is a question for Nancy Carey or Tricia Erpelding. So I alluded before to the recent school shooting in Florida. And so we've seen, obviously, a huge response to the students' calls for new gun laws. There's also been a lot of criticism of politicians who respond to talk of gun violence by talking about mental health issues. This is a thing. To some extent, it is true that there are politicians who use that as a screen or a reason, a way to not answer the question that was asked of them. But I don't think any of us would be here tonight if we didn't see youth mental health as a legitimate issue in itself. So I guess I'd be interested in either both of you. Are these two conversations about gun violence and about youth mental health in tension? Can we have both? What's the right path forward? Please tell us, just Tricia. All I'm asking is, what's the right path forward?
Solve all the problems.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that there are a lot of pieces to the pie when tragedies like this happen. You have to think about the trauma that people have experienced. You have to think about the mental health concerns people have. You have to think about what are the gun laws that are, currently on the books. And I think you have to look at just society as a whole, all of the things that are happening around us. And I think that I obviously do not have all of the answers to how to fix that whole thing, but I definitely believe that providing mental health support to students in whatever way we can is one piece of that answer. I think personally, more appropriate gun laws are another piece of that answer. But to go back to the mental health care piece, just because that's the reason why we're all here, I think that there are a lot of great things happening in Sheboygan County in particular. We have the PATH program, which is providing access to healing. That's actually putting clinicians within the schools, removing all of the barriers of transportation and parents having to take off of work in order to get their kids to appointments and things like that. And we have that in place in 7 or 8 schools within Sheboygan County, with even more kind of joining on in the next school year. We also have organizations like Horizons for Girls and WISE and Mental Health America who are providing programs to students who just need that extra support and need help with coping and need help building their resilience. And I think that if we can provide those things and also bring parents and teachers and community members on board to support our students and our community members together, I think that that is a huge piece of the pie that will help to solve some of those problems that we see.
Thank you so much.
One of the things that I also think about when I look at the youth with mental health is being more proactive rather than reactive. One of the things that I thought about when you were talking, Guadalupe, is your behaviors were asking for help. And if we can look at what those behaviors mean rather than just responding to those behaviors, what are those behaviors telling us? We can be proactive. We can help meet those needs before it gets really out there and explosive. And so we really have to look at, instead of asking, what's wrong with you? asking what happened to you, and understanding that can understand how we can put things into place so that it doesn't go there. And I think that's, I think it's part of what you are doing in the schools in helping the kids be mindful. It's part of what we're doing in our parenting workshop in helping teach people what that's about so that they can look at things through a different lens, a trauma lens rather than a naughty kid kind of lens.
Please.
Something that comes to mind when considering this instance as well has to do with the media, actually, and what is presented. And there's a lot of different frames that we hear. Let me start over. There's a lot of different stories going on in the media right now related to gun violence and mental health. And some of them are helpful and some are not. And I have no correct answer to your question by any means, but one of those images that I think is incredibly powerful and meaningful and can help to reduce stigma is all of the media attention given to the young people who are doing astounding, amazing things in the midst of crisis, in the midst of trauma, despite being told to be quiet and to know their place. And so I think if we want to talk about resilience and use that framing, they are an outstanding source in which to look at right now.
Thank you so much. I want to go to Carla Vorpal for a moment, because this community, like communities, too many communities across. Carla, as a social worker with the Sheboygan School District, can you speak a little bit about what happens?
We're very lucky in the Sheboygan Area School District. About 10 years ago now, we received a Garrett Lee Smith Memorial Grant. It was a large grant, and we put it to very, very good use. And one of the things that we did was we formed a district and community-wide committee, and one of the subcommittees took a really long, hard look at our district policies when it comes to suicide education and intervention. And we developed a very concrete, step-by-step tool that gives our administrators and our pupil services professionals specific guidelines as to this is what we're going to do when there is a student who expresses suicidal ideation, this is what we're going to do when there is a student who has a suicide attempt, and this is what we're going to do when a student loses their battle to depression and ends their life. And it's a wonderful tool so that when these very challenging situations happen, our administrators, our pupil service providers, we don't have to go, oh my gosh, what do we do? No, we have to open up this document that gives bullet by bullet points as to what we have to do. Those same documents have been revised many times since they were created.
What are some of the things? I mean, we don't need to go through the whole list, but I think I'm interested to know what are concretely some of the actions.
So are you talking about with a completed?
Let's say, let's start with suicidal ideation.
So if a teacher, pupil service provider, somebody in the school building finds out that a student has expressed some ideas about ending their own life, if that student has shared with a peer and that peer has come forward, first and foremost, the folks in our buildings know that we get that person to a school counselor, a school psychologist, a school social worker, whoever is available as a pupil service provider in their building. If their building does not have a pupil service provider, those building folks know to contact other folks in the district who can come then to that building and take care of that student.
Sure.
That pupil service provider then meets with that student and does a very long, lengthy suicide assessment that looks at kind of the basic things. What are those thoughts? When did these thoughts begin? On a scale of 0 to 10, how powerful are those thoughts for you right now? Have those thoughts led to a plan? If so, what is that plan? Do you have access to fulfill that plan? And that's just the start of a very lengthy assessment that then leads us as professionals to make a decision about that student's danger to himself or to others.
Sure.
And depending on that assessment, we will either develop a safety plan with the student and with the parent. Parents always, of course, come on in. We need to sit down in person and talk about this. We may encourage the parent to voluntarily take that child to our local hospital for a further assessment as to whether or not there needs to be an inpatient placement. Sure. We are blessed in Sheboygan to have a crisis mobile unit. In those circumstances where we as pupil service professionals can't get a parent, or we believe the student needs to be hospitalized against their wishes, we can call in the crisis mobile unit, and they will again assess the student
Sure.
and determine if that student needs to be hospitalized.
So what about following a completed suicide? How do you protect other students in the district?
Well, first and foremost, a call goes out as soon as the building principal becomes aware that they've lost a student. And there is no timeline for that. It can be 2 o'clock in the morning. That principal then opens up that document and usually starts by contacting the pupil service professional at their building to get the email out, get the phone call out, so that first thing in the morning we have already counselors, social workers, psychologists at the building ready to attend to our students' needs the moment they arrive on site.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I would be interested in taking some questions, some of your questions. Pete, Frank, do we have any questions from attendees?
Yes, we have a question here. At what point does someone's behavior/choices stop being viewed as he's young, making questionable choices, to a cry for help?
Panel.
So I don't know. I think that's a two-part question because it's a slippery slope and it's a very fine line sometimes. And looking at each child and each youth very individually, to look at where they're at. And again, that question is not what's wrong with you, but what's happened. And so looking at that, and I think that behavior has a meaning no matter what it is. And it might not be I'm suicidal. It may be I'm unhappy with myself, or I don't have anyone to tell me how to do this, or it could be a number of things. So I think all behavior has something behind it, whether it's because of trauma or because of a choice. And looking at that and what's behind those behaviors, that being said, that doesn't mean that they're not held responsible for those behaviors, whether it's trauma or whether it's a choice. But being able to put both into place, what's going on, and you still have to be responsible. Did that answer that at all? Does that make sense?
It's sure. Although it's a bit hard. I mean, can you say? I'd be interested to hear you say more on that balance. Somebody who has gone through a trauma acts out in all sorts of ways, and what is it? You know, to some people's ears, it would sound like you're excusing bad behavior in this sense. So how do you? I would be interested to hear a little more on striking that balance between accepting consequences for your actions, even for a young person, and also recognizing that there's something deeper at work.
So I don't think, I think they're not mutually exclusive from each other. If you have a young man or a young girl who is for instance, every time he's told no, he blows up. Looking at that from the outside, it's like, well, you just don't want to accept no. But if you look at perhaps whenever he was told no or did something wrong in his home, he got beat. And so when we are in a state of crisis, our big thing is fight, flight, or freeze. And so if he's always in that state of crisis, then he's always going to get to one of those states. And his primary is to fight. And so he blows up, or he hurts someone. Understanding that is, again, that being proactive and looking at how to help him calm down instead of react, and the mindfulness and that kind of thing. However, you don't just let him blow up without consequences. If he can't, he's got to know that those behaviors aren't okay. But teaching him how to calm himself down before those behaviors is also very important.
Thank you. Any others on the panel?
I would just add to what Nancy said by saying that in some situations, consequences don't necessarily need to mean punishments. Consequences could be learning more tools and, you know, having a teacher provide you with extra supports in order to build some of those coping skills. At some of the schools that we are at, we have had, for our mindfulness program, we have had teachers who do work with students either one-on-one or in the special ed rooms or wherever it may be, where they are kind of going a little bit more in depth than what we're doing in the classrooms. And we are in the rooms for about 15 to 20 minutes twice a week. So we really, you know, see that child for a very brief snapshot of what their whole week is. And I think sometimes there have been students where the teachers have noticed, you know, this is something that might really work, and maybe that student gets extra time to practice some of these things, or more supports are put into place in order to help that student reach their full potential and be as mentally well and as emotionally well, and everything else will kind of follow after that as long as those proper supports are put in place.
Thank you. Do we have any more?
Yes, we do. Too often we hear about students who complete suicide who told their friends or made plans known on social media, but no one reported it. What are organizations doing to educate students about the importance of reporting concerns?
That's a great question.
The number one thing that we say to students is if you are worried about a friend, you need to tell somebody. And really, to put that in perspective, it's kind of that, which, you know, it's better to be safe than sorry. And one of the acronyms that they use in the schools is ACT. So A is acknowledging those signs and those symptoms. The C is to care, basically, and to, you know, talk to that friend. Ask them, do you have a plan? Which can be really scary for a student to, you know, well, I don't want to ask that because maybe they do have a plan. Well, then you know that, and you can go, and then the T stands for tell. You tell an adult that you trust. So we do teach the students when we go in and do our depression awareness and suicide awareness programs with students that if they are concerned, absolutely 110% tell someone that can do something about it. And a lot of times students are kind of in this world where they think that they need to solve everything themselves, and that, oh, well, my friend is really upset and I'll be able to, you know, help them and get them through it. And that's not always the case. So we teach them, you know, find an adult that you trust, a teacher, a parent, a coach, whoever it may be, and get help for that person. And if it turns out that maybe that person, you know, didn't have a plan or didn't have some of those steps in place, at least now you've said something and you're able to kind of get that ball rolling if something does more concerning happens in the future.
Any others have thoughts on, you know, social media is just the fabric of teens' lives today, and all of ours, right? Mine too. And it does have an effect of amplifying or exacerbating at least some potential, you know, mental health challenges. Do others have, has that been your experience with young people that you've worked with, and what is the answer?
Our students at Horizons are encouraged to communicate with our mentors in the venue that they're comfortable, Facebook. You know, the more we can monitor what's happening in that social media, the more we become comfortable with their terminology, the way that they're stating something. When I first started working with students and I would watch Facebook, I would immediately react and go, oh my gosh. And the more I start to understand how they're using that social media, and I understand that tool that they're using. I've become aware of how they're communicating. Our students know that our mentors, not all of them, but many of them are available 24/7. So if they feel that there's someone that they need to communicate to about something personally or something they've seen in social media, please, they know, they pick up that phone, they talk to a mentor. There's nothing embarrassing about sharing what you're seeing or hearing. Communication is a great tool, and they need to use it.
So one of the programs we provide at InHealth and through WISE is known as the Honest Open Proud program, or HOP for short. And it is a small group program designed to help people make safe, strategic decisions about whether or not to share their stories of mental health challenges. And we break it down to thinking about the pros and cons of doing so in every setting of your life. One of them, especially for young people, obviously being social media. And it's been so intriguing to me to watch how the conversation unfolds differently when I talk to young people about the pros and cons of social media, and then when I talk to adults about the pros and cons of talking about mental health challenges on social media. Go figure, when I ask adults, the drawbacks of doing so tend to reign supreme, but young people have a variety of different reasons, well thought out, considerate intentions as to why sharing their story or part of their story on social media is meaningful for them and their recovery journey, perhaps. We tend to hear that, maybe I would prefer one-on-one conversations, but it's 2 a.m. and that's the only mechanism I have available to me, so thank goodness somebody's on the other end of the computer or somebody's on the text line. We hear, I have social anxiety or perfectionism, and so looking someone in the eyes and saying what I have to say is really hard. And so let me type it out and erase it 20 times until I get it just right, and then don't have to look someone in the eye when I do so. What it really comes down to, I think, is what's your reason? If your reason suggests sharing a part of your story or your journey on social media makes sense, then it's a mechanism in which to do so.
Yeah, I guess there's good things about it. Do we have more questions?
Yes, we have two more. There's a follow-up to that, that dealt with how do students bring forward these concerns. How do you recommend parents talk to their children about friends they may be worried about? What do you say to parents?
The number one thing really is education and having honest conversations with kids about things like this. If we care about our kids and we care about the mental health of our children and our community, we need to be willing to have these honest and open conversations with our kids and with one another. Something that we are really happy to provide to the community through a partnership with Health and Human Services and our healthcare providers in the community are QPR trainings, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And we offer these pretty frequently throughout the community, either MHA staff or some of our community partners. And people can come and attend these QPR trainings and learn how to ask people about their plans, their ideations, whatever it may be. And you can apply this in workplace settings. You can apply this in the community. You can do this with youth. It's a very, it's science-based, it's research-based, and it works. And it's really applicable to, any person in the population. So we just encourage people to just learn more and have those honest conversations with one another.
I want to. Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think that the other thing I want to add is, we talked about mental health being something that is important to talk about. It's also important to bring awareness for the suicide. And one of the things that you guys do is the suicide walk every year, and that brings a tremendous amount of awareness so that it's not a stigma anymore. It's not closeted, and we can talk about it, and it makes people more comfortable so that they can talk to each other and to the youth about it.
One thing that MHA really prides itself on is that a lot of us on our staff have some sort of lived experience with mental illness. Kind of going off of the social media thing, I actually myself disclosed a mental illness on Facebook just last week. I struggle with postpartum depression after having my son in June, and I wrote an article for the Sheboygan Press and then shared it on MHA's Facebook page. So it is out there. I strategically chose to disclose and broadcast that information. But because we have those lived experiences, I feel like we're so much better equipped to speak with our community members and talk to youth and say, you know what, we've been there and we're in this situation where now we've built that resilience and we are able to be successful and be out in the community and share our stories with others. And especially at our open door facility, which is run by peer support specialists who have a variety of challenges that they've overcome, and now they're in this place to help build other people up and to help them through that journey. So I think just the more that we can share with one another and be okay with sharing with one another, the more it's going to just build everyone up and to help everyone to be comfortable with addressing these things.
Tricia Erpelding, can I ask a question? Did you, in doing that, in making that decision, one reason I assume is for the sorts of causes that we're here today, right? To say that everyone goes through their own challenges. Besides that, that's a strategic reason. Besides that, did it make you feel better?
I think it did. I remember having the conversation with my mom, who I was kind of afraid to tell her face to face. So I chose to send her a text and just say, just to let you know, this is what I was diagnosed with today. And she, of course, sent back the, oh my gosh, and are you okay and everything? And I said, yes, I'm fine. But even in, talking to my mom and my family members and my husband and my boss, I said, if I have to be a statistic, I really kind of lucked out to be in the position I am, where I work in mental health and I knew the signs and I knew what to do, and I have a platform where I can share things like that. So I think that it did help me feel better in the sense that it helped me to share with other people that it can happen to anyone and to not be ashamed and to talk about the challenges that people face. Because anywhere from 25 to 50% of the population, really depending on the statistics you look at, is going to struggle with a mental health challenge at some point in their life. And to be able to be someone who can share my own experience and hopefully help someone else share theirs, or to help someone else get help. With writing my article, if there's a mom out there who read it and was like, oh my gosh, this is me, I want to go and get help, fantastic. I helped them to do that. So I think in that regard, it made me feel better. So hopefully that answered your question.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. We'll take another.
Yes, we have a lot more questions.
Well, we'll get to as many as we can. Just know if we do, if we don't get to yours, we thank you for being here.
A good majority of trauma occurs to young children, elementary school age. What programs are in place to help these younger children if they are enduring abuse or traumatic situations? Can they be helped before they enter middle school?
I think that there's a great number of programs that are out there. We have a lot of very good mental health professionals in town, and there are some mental health professionals that do work with very young children, and we're finding that kids may be in middle school or late elementary, but they're functioning very little, and so when you approach it at that age, it helps. And so there's play therapy, there's art therapy, there's a lot of different kinds of therapy out there that help kids at all different levels. elementary. The program that I work with in Human Services is the Comprehensive Community Services, and we work with a lot of kids that are in elementary school and younger ages that are exhibiting some symptoms of mental health that we can help build a support team for them. So I think there's a lot of different programs. You know, when Tricia was talking about going in and working with the elementary schools to do the mindfulness and the coping skills, there's also in the schools, there's coping, there's life skills and there's social skills that they're building to help with those kind of things. So I think Sheboygan County has a lot to offer for kids of any age.
Please.
I have another one.
Keep them coming.
Oftentimes, those students struggling aren't necessarily the ones who act out, but can be a top student. How can we educate teachers and others to realize that often those who struggle the most are often the quietest ones?
Mental illness is sometimes referred to as an invisible illness, and there's a reason. I mean,
I think that, again, education coordinator at MHA, so I feel like all of my answers are education. Bringing information to teachers. There are a lot of great programs and trainings out there for teachers to learn more about mental health and the mental health of their students. And I think that, going back to some of the things that I had said previously, there are a lot of great programs already in place for students in Sheboygan County. And I think that the more that we can reduce stigma and the more we can educate folks, I hope that more of these students are able to speak out. But I think that even though our teachers are spread pretty thin and expected to do so much within our schools, I think they really do care about their students a lot, and they want to do the best for their students. And we get a lot of calls from educational professionals at MHA who are looking for resources for their students. So it makes me really hopeful that even the students who maybe aren't reaching out and saying, hey, I need help, that the teachers know, and the teachers are, in tune with their students. And it's really an amazing thing, especially, in the past few weeks when we've gotten calls from educational professionals who are, asking us to come in and help with different situations and to get resources for their students when students are either in crisis or when they just have some of those concerns. So to me, I feel like there are a lot of good things happening, and that there are a lot of great teachers out there who are looking out for their kids.
I'd like to shift gears real quick, and we'll come back to some more questions. But I do want to highlight a piece of reporting that we've done recently in the Kids in Crisis series about it's not an obvious youth mental health issue, but it really is when you look at the research, and it's school start times. I have a short video.
With the new start times, I'm able to focus better. I'm getting more sleep, which is helping me not feel as groggy or distracted.
I do feel more alert and more rested because my freshman year, I believe, I had to be here at 7:45, and that means I had to wake up so early, and I took the school bus too, so it was like my pickup time for the school bus was like 6:05.
Which is just too early. I mean, come on. So what time does high school start in Sheboygan? 7:55. So 7 o'clock. Yeah. So the U.S. Centers for Disease Control recommends 8:30. there's very strong evidence that teens who don't get enough sleep are at higher risk for anxiety, depression, and suicide. Is there any? Is this a discussion? This is a little bit of a different sort of issue, but it's a structural issue that really does have an effect. Does any, has there been a discussion of pushing back school start times? Is anyone aware of that? Does anyone think maybe there should be? It's something to consider.
I would have to say, as a student in high school who may or may not have gotten in trouble for truancy, I would 150% support later start times. My mother is also an attendance secretary in the Sheboygan Area School District, and we have had a lot of conversations about this. Just from her standpoint as someone who has to enter attendance data, and my standpoint as a former child who had trouble getting up in the morning, and as a mental health professional, and we both are fully in support of a later start time. And also my perspective of being in schools, and I have been in a high school at 7:45 in the morning on a Monday trying to present to kids who looked at me like there was just nothing. There was nothing there. And I've been in classrooms at 10 in the morning, and students are engaged, and great things are happening. So I think if there's any evidence whatsoever that there is something out there that's beneficial to our kids, why not put it in place?
Because you got to reschedule the buses, and it's a whole thing. Yeah.
I'm curious, what about the benefit to educators and support staff as well? If it's helping kids, it might very well help people who we are asking to look after and help and support our kids as well. And so I think whether the research suggests that or not would provide further support for such a structural change. You can also show that it helps people working with and for kids too.
All right, we'll go back to an audience question.
All right, this one is, there remains a disconnect between school-based programs and the pediatricians trying to help treat those problems medically. HIPAA and FERPA, I think it is, rules are largely to blame. How do we bridge this gap? And I'm wondering, Carla Vorpo, as a social worker, what are you able to share with their doctors and that sort of information?
Absolutely nothing, unless, of course, parents are willing to sign a release of information that specifically lays out what we are able to share and discuss. I, as a matter of practice, and I know my colleagues as well, every student that I work with who is working with a mental health professional in the community or is working with their pediatricians for mental health, I do get a release of information. There are layers to that are challenging, of course. We've got busy professionals out there, and connecting in person can be very difficult. So there are times that email is very handy, not using names, but initials, of course, to protect the rights of our students. But there are times when students or parents do not want to sign those releases of information. And of course, we are going to be incredibly respectful of that. But it's another barrier. And time is a barrier. Staffing levels is always going to be a barrier. But it's best practice to seek out permission from parents and students to have that open dialogue. And we certainly do our very best to make that happen.
I think, Dr. Britton, that was your question?
That was my question, right.
Do you want to
Sure.
introduce yourself, stand up, and speak to the problem you're seeing?
I have had so many opinions on all your questions. So I'm Jeff Britton. I'm a pediatrician here in Sheboygan. I'm also the immediate past president of the Wisconsin chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So these issues are statewide issues, not just local issues. Okay. So I wrote down that question because I had no idea we had health. I knew that Sheboygan South had a counselor. I had no idea that we had 7 or 8 schools in the county that had mental health professionals in. I have no idea how to access that. Nobody's told us that. There's been no education of the providers because, every day, there are days when, like, over half my patients are mental health patients. Today was a day like that. Last Friday was really a day like that. So I mean, I'm every day trying to figure out how do I connect kids with any therapist, and usually calling, MHA or whatever is a way to do it, but I have to just sort of put it into their system, put it into the hands of the parents and hope that they'll do it. So this issue is a repeated issue that's difficult.
So, Mental Health America houses the PATH coordinator for Sheboygan County. PATH is a program through United Way and a number of community partners. Ozaki Community Therapies is the provider who is actually in the schools providing those counseling hours. Would you like to speak a little about how that program works? Okay.
Yes, I'm Cynthia Carlson. I work for Ozaki Community Therapies as individual therapist, but I'm also working in the PATH program. Right now we're doing the outlying district schools like Elkhart Lake, Plymouth, Random Lake, I'm trying to think, Falls, yeah. Not Sheboygan City yet, but it looks like that may be a potential next year, next school year. But the way it is the school identifies the students that they would like to be seen, and then there's a referral packet put together. The parents sign, they sign releases so we can talk to the staff at school, which I think is amazing because that's been my biggest help, is talking to the special ed teachers, talking to the staff, talking to whoever. And I always make time in my, when I'm up there at each school for them to step in and see me if they need to, or via email. Because there's so many things that I think a therapist outside of the school has no idea what's going on in school. And the kids that have been identified, a lot of the parents are a little disconnected, so I don't get a whole lot of information from them. I get most from the school and from the child themselves. But so the referral gets sent in to our office, and then it's distributed to, I think there's 5 of us, one of the 5 of us depending. And it's an amazing program because it's a way of getting us in the schools and, being available, pretty much any day. I, respond to emails or whatever's going on. And if parents call, responding to them right away. So it's just, I think it's a great program. It's getting help to kids that would normally not access services due to, time or whatever, parents can't get the kids there. So it's a way of accessing for them.
Not a waiting list.
Yeah. And I've got kids that I'm seeing that are so thankful and really want this. I've got some kids that aren't as on board, but there are some kids that really, really are appreciative and want this and have asked me now if I will follow them to high school next year. So I've got quite a few 8th graders. So, and they're all boys, which really surprises me. But I mean, I shouldn't be like that, I suppose. But it just surprises me when the boys really appreciate it. So, yeah.
I think that one of the things that we can do better at is teaming. And the program that I work in human services is when I'm working with the family, I build the team. We build the team. Schools, therapists, I have a team that has an occupational therapist, a mental health therapist, a police officer, a mentor, the school. It's big, and we meet as often as we need to, no more or no less than once a month. And one of the things that I do in the beginning is reach out to the pediatricians that are providing the meds or the psychiatrists. I think that the gap there, though, is that when I reach out for those records, it goes to the record room. So I don't know if the actual psychiatrists or pediatricians ever get that information, that we're looking for that information. So if the file room sends us that stuff and you guys don't know about it.
Even if it comes to us, can you send me a release of information?
Yes.
I'm going to say send this to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the time to photocopy the stuff myself and send it.
No, right. But it would give you the heads up that, oh, there's someone working with this family.
Yeah, it's pretty vague.
Yeah. But that's one of the ways that we try and reach out to the pediatricians.
Without being at that meeting, we need to be part of that team.
Right. Yep.
There's a lot of barriers to that.
There is. There is.
But really what happens is you guys are doing all this stuff and then we're over here and all we have is the parent telling us or not telling us what's
Right.
going on.
That's interesting.
We have
Please.
The Executive Director for Mental Health America. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baer. I work with Tricia Erpelding. And I just wanted to follow up to that, Dr. Britton, that what I'm hearing is perhaps some conversations. Our PATH has a steering committee that was just developed. And so we have an upcoming meeting and conversations around how can we bring pediatricians either on board to this group that meets quarterly or just develop more clearer lines of communication, because clearly if you even knew that path existed, another resource you could share with parents are, you know, I have this list, these schools have counselors, clinicians right in the schools, is this a possibility, have you been approached? And so again, it's just coming together, as you said, Nancy, to try to problem solve the best way we can be most efficient and effective with our time. So I do appreciate that comment, because it made me go, ooh, agenda item, we need to figure out how we can connect all the dots. So thank you.
Okay. I think we have to end it there. Thank you so much for all the questions. I have a few more things before we go. I wanted to tell you about a part of our project this year that we are very excited about. So we're launching a podcast as part of this year's Kids in Crisis series. It is called This Is Normal, and it is built around our interviews with young people from all over the state, telling their own stories about how they face mental health challenges and how they made it through them. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Please, if you're a podcast listener, take out your phone right now. It's not rude. Do it. Subscribe. It's called This Is Normal, a podcast about youth mental health. We have the trailer episode now. The episodes are coming in March, and I'll play you this preview.
I remember walking into the hospital. Everybody's looking at me, and I felt so embarrassed because I was crying and still having my panic attack. And my mom was crying, and she's screaming. And she's like, we need to get in right now. Like, my daughter just swallowed a bunch of pills. And then I drank the charcoal, and that's the last thing I remember.
I've been writing about youth mental health for over 2 years with the Kids in Crisis Project.
We've talked to teenagers and young people from all over the state about how they face mental health challenges and how they made it through them.
With this podcast, we want to bring their voices directly through your speakers.
That night, if we would have knew that was our last night, we would have just held on to it.
They handcuffed me, put me in the car. I was back in like maximum security basically, and I never committed. I remember one night I still remember I was like screaming in my cell late at night, all alone.
Every time I talk to a young person about their mental health, I'm amazed at just the openness that they have. I think stigma is really coming down around mental health, and young people are at really the forefront of that push.
I'm Rob Netzer. I'm an editor for USA Today Network Wisconsin.
And I'm Rory Linnane, a reporter for the network based in Milwaukee.
Welcome to This Is Normal.
Because this is normal.
We need more help, and more help is more progress, because we don't need perfection in mental illness. We need progress so it can be better.
This is Normal, a new podcast about youth mental health, coming in March from USA Today Network Wisconsin. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or find them on our websites. So please join us. I hope you'll join us for that part of the project. So also, we have a few more things before we say goodnight. On Thursday, May 10th, we will be holding a call to action event in Madison at the Overture Center. There is more on that to come. We've done that for the last 2 years, and we'll do another event this year. in Madison to try to stir up some interest with our legislators. We would love to see you there, so watch for our information on that. We want to thank Bellin Health for underwriting the series, and thanks to Children's Hospital for additional support. Thanks to our hosts here at Meade Public Library, and thanks to all of you for attending, and thank you to our panel. Dr. Reed brought these decals that we'd like to pass out now. This is the Safe Person decal, 7 promises. This is a nice thing. You've seen the materials at the tables in the back. Please take the time to look at the resources in the back, including from the Hope Line, and please take the time to sign up for our newsletter, which Ms. Linnane is holding. We send a weekly, just once a week, with our latest reporting and links and materials that we hope will be interesting and edifying and worth your time. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for caring enough to be here. So good night.